The ship's engines hummed quietly as it descended toward the alien planet. Kai looked out of the small window, his eyes fixed on the vast landscape below. He had never seen anything like it: rolling hills that glowed in the light of two suns, strange plants that shimmered in colors he'd never imagined. The planet was beautiful, and yet, something about it felt unfamiliar, even unsettling. "Prepare for landing," came the voice over the intercom, snapping Kai from his thoughts. He straightened up, adjusting his uniform and preparing himself for the meeting ahead. It was important. A peaceful diplomatic mission to make contact with a species no human had ever encountered. The stakes were high. The ship landed gently, and the doors opened. Kai stepped out, his boots crunching on the soft ground. The air smelled fresh, almost sweet. His team followed closely behind, each one wearing the same mixture of excitement and anxiety. They were the first humans to visit this planet. The first to meet the aliens who lived here. As they approached the landing zone, a figure emerged from the mist. It was unlike anything Kai had ever seen before. The alien was tall, with skin that shimmered like polished metal. Her eyes were large and black, staring at him with a mixture of curiosity and authority. Her presence commanded attention, and Kai felt a sudden wave of awe wash over him. She stepped forward, her movements graceful but firm. The other aliens who stood beside her were similarly imposing: tall, proud, and powerful. They didn't speak, but their gazes were fixed on Kai and his team, making him feel as though they were being evaluated. "Greetings, humans," the alien queen said, her voice soft but clear. "I am Queen Zira, leader of the Orcsians. Welcome to our world." Kai felt his throat go dry. The queen's voice had an almost hypnotic quality, and he couldn't help but feel drawn to her. She was unlike any woman he had ever seen. There was something regal about her, something that made her seem as though she was both ancient and eternal. He found himself staring at her, unsure of what to say. "Thank you, Queen Zira," Kai said finally, forcing his voice to sound steady. "We come in peace, to establish a diplomatic relationship." The queen nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "We are aware of your mission. You humans have come a long way, and we are willing to listen." The meeting began. Kai and his team sat across from the queen and her advisors. They spoke of their worlds, of the technology that had brought them to this point, and of their hopes for a future of peace and cooperation. But as the discussions went on, Kai found it hard to concentrate. His mind kept drifting back to Queen Zira, her powerful presence filling the room. She was unlike anyone he had ever known. Her intelligence was obvious, but it was more than that. There was an energy about her, a force that seemed to pull him toward her. He tried to ignore it, to focus on the task at hand, but it was impossible. He found himself captivated by her every word, her every movement. As the meeting came to an end, Kai stood up along with the others, preparing to leave. But just as he was about to step away, he caught a glimpse of the queen's eyes. She was watching him. He felt his heart skip a beat. It was as though she was looking straight into his soul. I wish I could marry her," Kai whispered, the words slipping out before he could stop them. It was a thought, a wish, that had no real meaning. After all, he was just a soldier, and she was a queen, an alien queen at that. But the words had a power to them, a weight that he hadn't expected. The queen's gaze flicked to him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, to his shock, she turned fully toward him. Her eyes softened, and she took a step forward. Kai held his breath, unsure of what was happening. "My answer is yes," she said softly, her voice carrying across the space between them. Kai felt his knees go weak. What had just happened? Was she playing some kind of game with him? Or had she actually heard him, understood the wish he had whispered to himself? For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The air seemed to thicken, and Kai could feel his heart pounding in his chest. The other members of the diplomatic team stood still, watching the exchange with confused expressions. But Kai couldn't tear his gaze away from the Queen. She smiled, and it was a smile full of mystery. There was no laughter in it, no joy, but something else, something deeper. "I have heard your wish, Kai," Queen Zira continued, her eyes glowing with an inner light. "And I will hold you to it, if the future allows." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Kai standing in the middle of the landing zone, unsure of what had just transpired. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Had she really meant what she said? Or was it just some strange alien form of politeness? The others in his team slowly began to move, still confused by the moment. But Kai stayed where he was, his heart still racing. He had spoken a wish, a quiet thought, and somehow, the Queen had answered. The following day, Kai couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled in his chest after his brief conversation with Queen Zira. Her words echoed in his mind. "My answer is yes." He had whispered his wish, and she had answered it as though it were a promise, not just a passing thought. He spent the entire morning in meetings, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the Queen. He had always been trained to focus on the task at hand, but this was different. There was something about Queen Zira that made him feel as if the rules no longer applied. Later that afternoon, he received an unexpected message: "Meet me in the palace garden, alone." It was from Queen Zira herself. Kai's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew he had to go. He told his team he needed some time alone and made his way to the palace. The path leading to the garden was lined with strange, glowing plants that pulsed in rhythm with the planet's heartbeat. The entire place felt alive, as though the very air was aware of him. He reached the garden and paused for a moment. There, standing in the center, was Queen Zira. She was looking out at the landscape, her posture regal and commanding. As he approached, she turned to face him, her black eyes locking onto his. "You came," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I knew you would." Kai felt a rush of warmth spread through him, but he didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what you wanted," he admitted, feeling a little foolish. "But you asked to meet." She stepped closer, the distance between them growing smaller with each step. "I wanted to explain," she said softly. "Explain why I said yes." Kai's pulse quickened. "Why?" The Queen smiled, though it was not the kind of smile that brought comfort. It was more like a quiet understanding. "I saw something in you, Kai. Not just in your words, but in your heart. You are different from the others. You understand the value of peace, of unity, more than your people realize." Kai blinked, unsure of how to respond. "But I'm just a soldier. I don't know anything about ruling a planet. Or leading people." "You are more than just a soldier," Queen Zira said, her voice firm. "You carry the potential for something much greater. I see it in you. It's not just the human strength, or your skill in combat, but something deeper. A willingness to connect. To build something that lasts." Kai stood in silence, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always seen himself as just a soldier, a man who followed orders, who protected his people. He had never thought of himself as someone who could change the fate of an entire species. But as the Queen looked at him, something stirred inside him. He felt as though she was telling him something that went beyond what he could understand. Something he wasn't ready to hear. She continued, her voice softer now. "There is an ancient prophecy among my people. A prophecy that speaks of a human who will unite the Orcsians with the rest of the galaxy. Someone who will bridge the divide between our species and others. I believe that person is you." Kai's breath caught in his throat. "Me? I'm not anyone special. I'm just here to negotiate an alliance. To help my people and yours coexist." The Queen nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "You don't see it yet, but you have the potential to be much more than just a soldier or a diplomat. This connection between us is part of that prophecy. It's not just chance. It's fate. Kai's mind raced. A prophecy? Him. The idea seemed impossible. How could he, a simple soldier, be the one chosen to unite two worlds? He glanced at the queen, searching her face for any hint of doubt. But all he saw was certainty. I don't understand, he said, his voice shaking slightly. I never asked for any of this. I just wanted to do my job, to help. The queen reached out, placing her hand gently on his arm. I know, she said softly. But this is bigger than both of us. Your people and mine are on the brink of something important. The future of both our worlds depends on the choices we make now. And you, Kai, you are a part of that future. Kai felt a strange, tight knot in his stomach. This was too much. He had never considered that his simple wish to marry the queen could be tied to something so much greater. He didn't even know if he wanted this future. Could he truly be the one to unite their species? To bring peace between them? I'm not sure I can live up to this, Kai whispered, more to himself than to the queen. You don't have to do it alone, she replied, her voice reassuring. We will face the challenges together. You and I, as allies. Kai looked at her then, really looked at her. She was more than just a powerful leader. She was someone who believed in him, in his potential, even when he didn't. And somehow, that belief made the weight of the situation feel a little less heavy. I don't know what the future holds, Kai said, finally meeting her gaze. But I'll try. For you. For us. The queen smiled again, though this time it was a softer, more genuine smile. That is all I ask, Kai. Together, we will change the future. Kai didn't know what the future would look like, or how he would fit into the grand design the queen spoke of. But standing there, with her hand on his arm, he realized one thing: he would never be the same again. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was one he was now willing to walk. The days that followed were filled with tension. Kai couldn't stop thinking about his meeting with Queen Zira. She had revealed something to him that he could not ignore: a prophecy, a future where he had a role to play. But what did it mean for him? Could he truly be the one to unite their species? He didn't feel like a leader, only a soldier. Yet, the weight of her words hung heavy in his heart. He spent much of his time in the palace, working with his team to set up the next phase of the alliance. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the queen. Her mysterious words, her calm demeanor, the way she seemed to understand him in a way no one else ever had. He wanted to trust her, but how could he? Trust was earned, not given freely. One evening, as the twin suns began to set, Kai received another message from Queen Zira. Meet me in the arena. It's time to test your strength. Confusion washed over him. A test? What kind of test? He had been through enough battles and drills to know his own limits, but what did she mean? Still, he couldn't refuse. He made his way to the palace's vast training arena. The arena was enormous, surrounded by walls made of dark stone that seemed to absorb the light. As Kai entered, he noticed several figures waiting in the shadows. The queen stood in the center, her back straight and her posture commanding. She was not alone. Around her were several of her elite warriors, tall, muscular beings, each wearing armor that glowed faintly in the dim light. Kai swallowed hard. He knew this wasn't just a simple test of physical strength. There was something else at play here. He could feel it in the air, thick with the weight of expectation. Welcome, Kai, Queen Zira said, her voice echoing in the large space. Tonight, you will face a trial. A test not just of your body, but of your heart. Do you have the strength to face what lies ahead? To prove that you are ready to stand with us? Kai nodded, though a knot formed in his stomach. He had trained for combat, But this felt different. This was not just a fight. It was a test of everything he had become since arriving on this planet. One of the warriors stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of respect and challenge. "We will begin," the queen said. "Kai, you must face my warriors. Defeat them, and you will prove your worth. But remember, this is not just about victory. It's about trust." Kai's heart raced as the first warrior stepped into the center of the arena. The warrior was tall, his body rippling with muscle. He moved with the grace of a predator, his eyes locked on Kai's. The crowd around them grew silent, the tension thick in the air. Without warning, the warrior lunged at Kai, his blade drawn. Kai barely had time to react, raising his own weapon in defense. The clash of metal echoed through the arena as the two warriors circled each other, each waiting for the right moment to strike. Kai was quick, but the warrior was faster. Each time Kai attempted to strike, the warrior countered with ease, pushing him back. Sweat dripped down Kai's face as he fought to keep up. His body was tired, but his mind kept him focused. He couldn't lose. Not now. The battle raged on, and Kai felt the weight of every strike. He was outmatched in strength, but he relied on his agility and his quick thinking. For every move the warrior made, Kai responded with a counter, a twist of his body, a quick jab. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Kai saw his opening. The warrior overextended, and in that split second, Kai struck, his blade knocking the warrior's weapon to the ground. The warrior stumbled, and Kai pressed the tip of his blade against his chest, signaling his victory. The crowd erupted in applause, and Kai felt a brief surge of relief. But the battle was far from over. The queen's gaze was unwavering as she nodded to the next warrior. The trial wasn't just about winning. It was about proving something deeper, his ability to fight for something greater than himself. The next warrior stepped forward, and this time, Kai felt a new weight on his shoulders. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for trust. For the future of both their worlds. As the second warrior approached, Kai steadied his breath. The fight was tougher this time. The warrior was faster, more skilled. Each strike sent shockwaves through Kai's body, but he refused to back down. The queen's voice rang in his mind, reminding him that this was more than just a fight. This was a test of character. After a long and exhausting battle, Kai managed to disarm the second warrior, his breath heavy and his muscles aching. He stood victorious, though he knew the trial was far from over. The queen stepped forward, her eyes filled with a mixture of approval and expectation. "You have proven your strength, Kai. But the real test lies ahead." She motioned to the final warrior, a massive figure whose presence alone made the air feel heavier. This warrior was different. He had the aura of a leader, someone who had fought countless battles and emerged victorious every time. Kai knew this would be the hardest challenge yet. His body screamed for rest, but he refused to give up. He couldn't. Not now. The battle began, and it was unlike anything Kai had ever experienced. The warrior was relentless, pushing Kai to his limits. Every strike, every blow, felt like it could be the end. But Kai dug deep, finding strength he didn't know he had. He couldn't afford to lose now. Not when so much was at stake. With a final burst of energy, Kai lunged, disarming the massive warrior and knocking him to the ground. He stood over him, panting, his heart racing. The queen approached, her eyes shining with pride. "You have passed the test, Kai. But this was just the beginning. The real challenge is still to come." Kai stood there, exhausted but filled with a new sense of purpose. He had faced the trials, proven his strength, and earned the trust of the queen and her warriors. But the true challenge, what lay ahead, was far greater than anything he had ever imagined. The days after the trial were filled with quiet moments of reflection. Kai felt a strange sense of pride in himself for passing the queen's tests. He had earned their respect, but he also knew that the path ahead was uncertain. The Queen had spoken of a prophecy, of a future where he played a vital role in uniting their species, but could he truly live up to those expectations? The palace, with its grand halls and towering walls, felt different now. The air seemed heavier, filled with the whispers of ancient promises and challenges yet to come. Kai spent most of his time with his team, preparing for the next phase of the diplomatic mission. They had to establish the terms of the alliance, to ensure that both humanity and the Eryxians would benefit from the union. But despite all the work ahead, something didn't sit right with Kai. The Queen had been kind, generous even, but there was always a sense of distance between them. She was the ruler of her people, and he was a soldier and outsider. No matter how close they became, they could never truly be the same. One evening, as Kai made his way through the corridors of the palace, a soft voice called out to him from the shadows. Kai! He froze. The voice was familiar, but it wasn't the Queen. He turned to see one of the Queen's closest advisors, an Eryxian named Vorn, stepping into view. Vorn was tall and imposing, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to pierce through to the very core of a person. His presence was often unsettling, but Kai had learned to respect him during their time together. What is it, Vorn? Kai asked, his voice wary. Vorn glanced around, ensuring no one was near. He stepped closer, his expression serious. I need to speak with you in private. Kai hesitated but nodded. Something about Vorn's tone made him uneasy. They walked down a side hallway, far from the main chambers of the palace, where the only sounds were the distant echoes of the palace's silence. What's going on, Vorn? Kai asked as they stopped. Vorn looked around one more time before speaking. There are forces within the Queen's court who do not trust you, Kai. They see your growing influence as a threat. Kai frowned. What are you talking about? The Queen trusts me. Vorn cut him off. The Queen may trust you, but others do not. There are those who fear your role in the prophecy. They believe that a human cannot be the one to lead. They believe your presence here could lead to the downfall of their people. Kai felt a cold chill run down his spine. So what? Are they going to attack me? No, Vorn said, his voice darkening. But there are those who want you gone. They want to make sure that you never have the chance to fulfill the prophecy, to claim your place by the Queen's side. Kai's mind raced. He had known that not everyone would be pleased with the alliance, but this was different. Someone was actively working against him, trying to tear apart the fragile bond he had built with the Queen. But why are you telling me this? Kai asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. Vorn stepped closer, his face serious. Because I believe in you, Kai. I believe that you are the one who can bring about change. But if you're going to survive here, if you're going to fulfill your role, you need to know who your enemies are. Kai's eyes narrowed. And what do you want in return for this information? Vorn hesitated, but then his expression softened slightly. Nothing. I simply want to see the Queen's vision come to life. I believe in her cause, and I believe in your role in it. But you need to be careful. There are people who would rather see you fail than succeed. Kai nodded slowly, processing what Vorn had said. He knew there were always dangers in the political world, but this felt personal. There were those who saw him as a threat, and they would stop at nothing to remove him from the equation. Thank you for the warning, Kai said, his voice steady. I'll be careful. Vorn gave a slight nod before turning to leave. Remember, Kai, the Queen's enemies are not always the ones you can see. Be cautious who you trust. As Vorn disappeared into the shadows, Kai was left alone with his thoughts. The weight of what Vorn had told him sank in. He had thought he was on the path to peace, but now he realized just how fragile that path was. His relationship with the Queen, the alliance between their species, everything was at risk. The next morning, Kai met with the Queen, but his thoughts were clouded by the conversation he had with Vorn. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The Queen had been kind to him, but were there others around her who saw him as an enemy? Would they stop at nothing to tear him down? The Queen seemed to sense his unease. As they sat together in the royal chambers, she watched him closely. "You seem distant, Kai," she said softly. "What troubles you?" Kai took a deep breath, trying to push away the unease that gnawed at him. "I've been thinking about our alliance, about the future. There are those who believe that I shouldn't be here. That a human can never lead our people." The Queen's expression softened, but there was a fire in her eyes. "I know. There are always those who fear change. But you, Kai, you are part of this future. No one can take that away from you." Her words brought him some comfort, but a part of him still felt unsure. Could he truly trust her? Or was she just another figure in a world filled with political games? "I'll do whatever it takes to prove myself," Kai said, his voice firm. "But I need to know that you're with me. That you trust me." Queen Zira reached out, placing a hand on his arm. Her touch was warm, reassuring. "I trust you, Kai. I trust you with everything." But even as she spoke those words, Kai couldn't shake the feeling that the true battle was only just beginning. There were shadows in the palace, enemies hidden in plain sight, and he would have to face them if he wanted to survive. The peace that had seemed so certain just days ago now felt fragile, like a delicate thread ready to snap. Kai spent countless hours with his team, finalizing the terms of the alliance. Yet, every time he looked at the Queen, a quiet unease lingered in the back of his mind. It was clear that not everyone on the planet was as supportive of the human presence as they appeared. Some factions within her court whispered of betrayal and danger, but the Queen remained steadfast in her trust. Then, everything changed. One fateful evening, the tranquility of the palace was shattered by an urgent message. The distant alien empire, known as the Talkar, had declared war on the Erexians. Their vast fleet was on its way, and the Queen's people were not ready. Kai had heard rumors of the Talkar before. They were a ruthless race, known for their brutal conquests and unyielding hunger for power. They had been eyeing Erexia's rich resources for years, and now, they were about to take what they wanted by force. The Queen called for an emergency war council, and Kai was among those summoned. The palace's large, circular hall was filled with tension as the leaders of the Erexian factions gathered. The Queen stood at the center, her regal presence commanding silence. "We have no time to waste," the Queen said, her voice carrying across the room. "The Talkar will arrive within 3 days. We must prepare our forces, and we must be ready to fight for our survival." Kai stood near the back of the room, observing the exchange. The leaders of the various factions argued over tactics, resources, and alliances. But through it all, the Queen remained calm, her sharp mind processing every detail. After a long discussion, the Queen turned to Kai. "I need you to lead a battalion of human soldiers in defense of our people," she said. "Your training, your leadership, it could make the difference between victory and defeat." Kai's heart raced. He had never led a force this large before. He had been a soldier, a part of the bigger machine, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the future of 2 species. The weight of the responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. "I understand, Your Majesty," Kai said, his voice steady, though his mind was in turmoil. "But I don't know if I'm ready for this. I've never commanded a battalion before. The stakes are too high." Queen Zira's gaze softened, and she approached him. "Kai, you've already proven yourself in ways that others could never. You are not just a soldier. You are a leader. I believe in you." Her words, so full of trust, gave him a sense of strength. He wasn't sure he deserved it, but he couldn't back down now. There was no turning back. His role in this alliance was more than just diplomacy, it was now about the very survival of both their peoples. Over the next few days, Kai worked tirelessly to prepare the human soldiers for the upcoming battle. He oversaw their training, ensuring they were ready for the harsh terrain of Eryxia's war zones. The Queen's warriors, skilled in combat and strategy, offered their expertise, and the two forces trained together. Kai watched as the Eryxians fought powerful, quick, and efficient, but he also saw their hesitation. There was a fear in their eyes, a fear of losing their way of life, of being overrun by an enemy so much larger and more powerful. The human soldiers were ready, but they were nervous. They were here as allies, not conquerors, and this was their first real taste of combat on an alien world. They looked to Kai for guidance, and he felt the weight of their trust. The night before the battle, Kai found himself alone in his quarters, staring out at the vast landscape. The stars above Eryxia were different from Earth's, brighter, more vibrant, but they also felt more distant, as if the universe itself was watching. He thought about his family back home, about Earth. The war with the Talkar wasn't just about saving Eryxia, it was about the future of all humanity. If they failed here, the Talkar might turn their sights on Earth. They couldn't afford to lose. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Queen Zira standing there, her expression unreadable. "Kai," she said quietly, stepping inside. "I wanted to speak with you before the battle." Kai nodded, stepping aside to let her enter. "What is it, Your Majesty?" She met his gaze, her black eyes deep with emotion. "I know this will be difficult. I know that we are asking you to risk everything for a cause that isn't your own. But I believe that you are the key to our victory." Kai felt a lump form in his throat. "I don't know if I can do this. What if I fail? What if my soldiers aren't enough?" The Queen placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of comfort. "You have already proven yourself, Kai. Not just as a soldier, but as someone who understands the value of unity. The Talkar will not break us, not if we stand together." Her words brought a small sense of peace, but the anxiety in his chest didn't fully fade. He was about to lead soldiers into a battle that could change the course of history. He had never faced anything like this before. "I won't let you down," Kai said, his voice steady, but inside, he felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to leap into the unknown. The Queen smiled, her expression full of hope. "I know you won't." As they stood there, the distant sound of war drums began to echo through the palace. The Talkar were coming, and there was no turning back. Kai turned to face the window, his mind focused on the task ahead. The fate of two worlds rested in his hands, and he was ready to fight for it. The night before the battle, Kai couldn't sleep. His mind was racing with thoughts of the coming fight, the lives that were at stake, and the burden of leadership that now rested on his shoulders. The human soldiers were ready, but they were still uncertain. The Eryxians, on the other hand, were more experienced in combat, but their fear was palpable. The Talkar had no mercy. They were ruthless, and their forces were vast. Kai knew they were about to face an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. The war drums echoed through the palace, a constant reminder that time was running out. He stood by the window, looking out at the dark sky. The stars above seemed distant, as though even the universe was holding its breath. The future of both the Eryxian people and humanity hung in the balance. Kai had never felt so alone, yet so connected to something much larger than himself. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. Kai turned to see Queen Zira standing in the doorway. Her expression was serious, but there was a softness in her eyes that made his heart skip a beat. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Kai," she said quietly, her voice calm but firm. "We are about to face our greatest challenge. I know you are unsure, but you must know this, you are not alone in this fight." Kai didn't speak right away. He felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. He had always been just a soldier, a man who followed orders. But now, in this moment, he was something more. He was the leader of an alliance, the protector of two worlds. The responsibility was suffocating, but he couldn't back down. Not now. I'm not sure I'm ready for this, Kai admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I've never led an army. I've never faced an enemy this powerful. I don't know if I can do it. The queen walked closer, her eyes never leaving his. You've already shown more strength than most can even dream of. Your heart is what will carry you through this. You know what it means to fight for something greater than yourself. That is what makes you a true leader. Kai looked into her eyes, feeling a deep connection between them. There was something in her gaze that gave him the courage he needed. I won't let you down, he said, his voice steady now. The queen placed her hand on his arm. I know you won't. And I will be with you, Kai. In battle, in the darkest moments we fight together. This battle is not just for us. It's for all those who come after us. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that filled the room. Kai felt his anxiety begin to fade. He still didn't know what the future would bring, but he knew one thing for certain, he wasn't alone. The following morning, the battlefield was set. The sun rose over the horizon, casting a golden light on the land. Kai stood at the front of his battalion, his eyes scanning the horizon. The Talkar fleet was approaching. Their massive warships filled the sky like dark clouds, casting long shadows over the battlefield. The Eryxian warriors stood at his side, their faces set in grim determination. The time for talk was over. Now, there was only one thing left to do. Kai turned to his soldiers. We fight for our future, he said, his voice strong. We fight for those we love, for our homes, for peace. We will not let the Talkar take this from us. We will stand together, and we will win. The soldiers cheered, their voices rising in unison. Kai felt a surge of pride, but the fear was still there, buried deep within him. He had trained for moments like this, but nothing could truly prepare him for the weight of command. The battle would be fierce. Many would fall. But he had to believe that they could win. For the Queen. For humanity. For the future. The battle began with a roar. The Talkar descended from the skies, their ships unleashing a torrent of fire upon the battlefield. The Eryxians responded with a barrage of energy blasts, their weapons lighting up the sky. The ground shook as explosions rocked the earth. The air was thick with smoke and the sounds of combat. Kai's heart raced as he gave orders to his troops, moving swiftly through the chaos. He had to keep his soldiers focused. He had to keep them alive. The battle raged on for hours. The Talkar were relentless, pushing forward with no regard for their own losses. They were a tidal wave of destruction, and it seemed as though nothing could stop them. Kai's soldiers fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. The Eryxians held their ground, but they were not invincible. The tide of battle was turning. Kai could see it in their faces, the fear, the exhaustion. He knew that if they didn't act soon, they would be overwhelmed. In the midst of the chaos, Kai spotted the queen. She was leading her warriors, her sword raised high as she charged into the fray. Her presence was commanding, her every move filled with purpose. But then, in an instant, a Talkar warrior lunged at her. Kai's heart stopped. The queen was knocked to the ground, her sword slipping from her grasp. Without thinking, Kai rushed toward her, his pulse pounding in his ears. He fought his way through the enemy lines, his heart focused only on her. As he reached her side, he saw the Talkar warrior raising his weapon for the final strike. Without hesitation, Kai threw himself in front of the queen, taking the blow meant for her. The pain was intense, but he didn't care. His body hit the ground, but he was still alive, still holding on to the thought that he couldn't fail. The queen's voice echoed in his ears as she knelt beside him. Kai. No. But Kai managed a smile, his breath ragged. I promised. I would protect you, he whispered. The queen's eyes filled with tears, but she wasn't going to let this moment define them. She called for her warriors to regroup, and they pushed the tall car back. The battle wasn't over, but with Kai's sacrifice, they had bought enough time for their forces to strike back. Kai's vision blurred as he lay on the battlefield, his body aching from the blow. The pain was sharp, but his thoughts were clearer than ever. He had failed to protect the queen, but he had bought them time. That was all that mattered now. The battle raged on around him, but his focus remained on her. His duty was not finished. He could not, would not, let this be his end. The queen knelt beside him, her hand trembling as it touched his shoulder. You will not die today, Kai, she said fiercely, her voice full of determination. Not while I still breathe. Kai tried to smile, but the pain was overwhelming. His body felt as though it were breaking apart. The blood soaked into his uniform, and every breath was a struggle. He wanted to speak, to tell her that he had done his best, but the words would not come. You've already done more than I could ever ask of you, the queen whispered, her voice breaking. I will not lose you now. She turned to her warriors, her voice commanding. Get him to the healing chamber. Quickly. The Eryxian warriors moved with purpose, lifting Kai's weakened body and carrying him away from the battlefield. His eyes fluttered closed, the darkness threatening to pull him under, but he fought against it. The queen was right, he couldn't die yet. There was still too much to fight for. When Kai awoke, he found himself in a dimly lit chamber. The air smelled faintly of herbs, and soft lights glowed around him. He felt cold and weak, but the pain in his chest had dulled. He realized he was no longer on the battlefield, and that brought him some relief. The battle was still raging, but he had been pulled from the front lines. The queen was sitting by his side, her face weary but resolute. She looked up as he stirred, and her expression softened. You're awake, she said, her voice gentle. I was afraid we had lost you. Kai tried to sit up but found that his body refused to cooperate. The wounds from the Talkar warrior's strike were deep, but they had been treated. He was alive, but not unscathed. The battle, did we win? He asked, his voice raspy. The queen's eyes darkened. Not yet. The Talkar still press forward, but they are beginning to falter. Your actions, your sacrifice, gave us the strength to push them back. The tide has turned, Kai. We are winning. Kai's heart swelled with pride, though his body screamed in protest. He had done it. He had made a difference. He had fought for something greater than himself, and now, it was paying off. But there was still more to do. The war was far from over. You're strong, Kai, the queen said, her voice full of respect. I knew it from the moment we met. You have the heart of a true leader. Kai's eyes met hers, and for the first time since the battle began, he felt a sense of peace. It wasn't the peace of victory, but the peace that came from knowing he had done everything he could. The battle, the war, the future of their two peoples, it was no longer just a dream. It was something they could make a reality. I'm not the leader you think I am, Kai said softly. I'm just a soldier. I was only doing what needed to be done. The queen shook her head, her eyes filled with admiration. No, Kai. You are so much more. You are the hope for this galaxy, for both our people. You have shown us that we can stand together, no matter the odds. The words hung in the air between them, a promise and a burden all at once. Kai didn't know if he could live up to them, but he knew one thing for certain: he would try. He had already sacrificed too much to stop now. The doors to the healing chamber opened, and a group of soldiers entered, their faces grim. They were covered in dust and blood, but there was a fire in their eyes. They had not yet won, but they were fighting for something far greater than themselves. They were fighting for the future. One of the soldiers stepped forward. "The Talkar are retreating," he said, his voice full of disbelief. "Their forces are in disarray. We've broken their lines." A cheer rose from the soldiers behind him, and Kai could feel the energy in the room shift. The battle wasn't over, but it was clear that the tide had turned. They had won this fight, and that was more than Kai had ever hoped for. The queen stood up, her face filled with both relief and resolve. "This is not the end," she said, her voice commanding. "We have won today, but there is still much work to be done. We must rebuild, we must strengthen our alliance, and we must ensure that the Talkar never threaten us again." Kai looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. He had never seen anyone like her, someone so strong, so determined, and yet, so compassionate. She was the true leader of their people, and he was honored to stand by her side. "Whatever comes next," Kai said, his voice steady despite the pain, "we'll face it together." The queen nodded, her eyes filled with conviction. "Together," she echoed. "This is just the beginning, Kai. Together, we will change the future." Outside the chamber, the sounds of the battle began to fade, replaced by the sound of cheers. The Talkar had been defeated, but the real victory was still to come. It would take time, but with their newfound alliance, they would rebuild, stronger than ever. Kai smiled, feeling a sense of hope for the first time in a long while. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: he had found his place in it. And with the queen at his side, they would lead their people to a new dawn.